The house was perfect, or at least that's what we had thought when we first moved in. It was nestled in the quiet town of Jesup, Georgia, a place where people came to escape the noise and chaos of bigger cities. The property was large, with a sprawling backyard that bordered a thick patch of woods, and my girlfriend Emily had fallen in love with it immediately. We'd only been living there for a month, but we were already imagining a future, getting a dog, raising a family, and enjoying the peace this small town offered. But it didn't take long for things to go wrong. The first 2 nights in the house were normal. We spent the weekend unpacking, hanging up pictures, and settling in. The weather was cool and crisp, and the gentle breeze through the woods was calming. On Monday night, though, everything changed. It was around 10 p.m. We had just gone to bed after a long day of work. The house was quiet, eerily so. Emily was already drifting off, but I was struggling to fall asleep, listening to the soft hum of the wind outside. That's when I heard it, a loud, eerie blast of music coming from the backyard. I sat up immediately, unsure if I was imagining it. The sound was strange, nothing like any music I'd heard before. It was eerie, distorted, and sent a chill down my spine. I nudged Emily awake, and she groggily sat up, her eyes widening as she listened. "Where is that coming from?" she whispered. I shook my head, confused. Definitely not the neighbors. It's too loud, and it sounds like it's coming from right outside. We exchanged nervous glances before I decided to check it out. I flicked on the backyard lights and peered out the window. The music was louder now, but I couldn't see anyone in the yard. The sound seemed to be coming from somewhere deeper, like the woods behind our house. I opened the back door and stepped onto the grass, the cold night air biting at my skin. The music played on, growing more distorted, more sinister. It sent shivers through me. I scanned the tree line, expecting to see someone, but there was no one there. After a few minutes, the music abruptly stopped, and an unsettling silence fell over the yard. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. Emily was waiting anxiously when I returned to the bedroom. "It stopped," I said, trying to sound calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Do you think it was just a prank?" she asked. "Maybe. Could be kids messing around, but it didn't feel right." The next night, it happened again. We had just turned off the lights when the music started blasting from the backyard. This time it was louder, more jarring. I jumped out of bed and looked out the window. The same creepy, distorted tune was echoing through the yard, but this time there was something else, an object lying in the grass. I told Emily I was going to check it out, but she grabbed my arm. "Please don't," she said, her voice shaking. "We should just call the cops." "We will," I assured her, "but let me see what it is first." With a flashlight in hand, I headed outside. The music was blaring, louder than before. As I approached the object, I realized it was an old, beat-up radio, the kind you'd see in a thrift store. I knelt down and turned it off, the sudden silence almost deafening. I held it up to show Emily through the window, shouting that someone must have left it to mess with us. Then I heard her scream. I looked up to see her standing at the window, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. "Run!" she screamed. "Run back inside, now!" My heart leapt into my throat. I turned, shining my flashlight toward the woods. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, standing at the edge of the woods, perfectly still. They were spaced out about 6 feet apart, just watching me. I couldn't see their faces, only their dark silhouettes, but the sheer menace in their stance was enough to freeze me in place. My mind raced, but my legs finally kicked in. I bolted back to the house, slamming the door behind me, my heart pounding out of my chest. Emily was sobbing, barely able to speak. "They were just standing there, watching you." I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived quickly, but by the time they searched the property, the figures were gone. The officers took the radio with them, promising to investigate, but I could tell they thought it was just a prank. They shone their flashlights into the woods, likely hoping that whoever was out there would get scared off. It didn't comfort me. For the next few nights, nothing happened. Emily and I tried to relax, convincing ourselves it was just some local kids messing with the new people in town. But we couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then, Thursday night came. We were getting ready for bed when the music started again. This time, it was louder than ever, and my blood ran cold the moment I heard it. Emily was already trembling beside me. "Not again," she whispered. I grabbed the flashlight, but before I could move, there was a loud bang at the back door. Someone or something was pounding on it, hard. The windows rattled, and the pounding grew more frantic. Emily screamed, backing away from the door. I ran to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek out. 4 figures were outside, walking slowly across the yard, approaching the house. They were circling us, tapping on the windows, their faces hidden in the darkness. The music blared from somewhere nearby, adding to the terror of the moment. I called the police again, my hands shaking as I told the dispatcher what was happening. The figures continued to circle the house, never coming too close, but always staying just out of reach. When the police arrived, the figures scattered, disappearing into the woods. This time, the officers took us seriously. They searched the woods thoroughly and found something disturbing, a campsite hidden deep within the trees. It was filled with strange, unsettling items, old radios, satanic symbols, and personal belongings from other homes nearby. It was clear that whoever had been tormenting us had been watching us for a while. The police eventually caught the culprits, an older man and 2 younger accomplices who had been squatting in abandoned houses around the area. They had a history of terrorizing new homeowners, using radios to play disturbing music and scare their victims. They had been watching us from the woods, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were arrested and charged with a laundry list of crimes, including harassment and trespassing. The relief we felt when they were taken away was immense, but the fear they had left behind lingered. The woods, once peaceful, had become a dark, menacing place. Emily and I finally felt safe again, but we would never forget those terrifying nights. The house was still our dream home, but it came with nightmares we hadn't anticipated. We learned the hard way that some dangers are very real, and they can be hiding just beyond the trees, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had always loved to travel. My friends, however, were either too busy or couldn't afford to fly to a million different places as I did, so I usually found myself exploring solo. One of the last places on my bucket list was Austin, Texas, a lively city full of culture and charm that I had yet to visit. I had been to most of the major cities in Texas, but had never set foot in Austin, so when I had the opportunity, I booked a solo trip. I stayed in a cozy hotel near downtown, a perfect spot to explore the heart of the city. The first day went smoothly. I checked in, admired the Texan skyline from my room, and then decided to relax a bit before heading out to explore. While waiting in the hotel lobby, a man struck up a conversation with me. He was a little older, perhaps in his late 30s, and had an easy smile. He asked me where I was from, how long I'd be staying, and if I had ever visited Austin before. I mentioned that it was my first time, and he offered to carry my bags up to my room since he was heading upstairs anyway. I hesitated, but didn't see any harm in accepting his help. He carried my bags to the elevator, and we rode up to the second floor together. When we reached my room, he set my bags down, smiled, and said it was nice to meet me. I thanked him, and he turned to leave. Something about his smile seemed off, but I brushed it aside. I wanted to stay positive and enjoy my vacation. After a brief nap, I went down to the lobby, ready to explore the city. As I headed out, the woman at the front desk called me over. She asked if I knew the man who had helped me with my bags. When I said no, she frowned. "He's been hanging around outside for a while," she said, her voice low. "I don't think he's staying here. Please be careful, and if you see him again, let us know." My stomach churned with unease. Maybe she was just being overly cautious, but her concern unsettled me. Nevertheless, I headed out into the city, eager to explore. The day passed quickly, and I did my best to enjoy myself, but the woman's words stuck with me. When I returned to the hotel that evening, I noticed a new person behind the front desk, so I didn't mention the earlier conversation. After a quick shower, I changed into fresh clothes and laid down for a power nap. I was just about to drift off when there was a knock on the door. "Housekeeping," a man's voice said. I hadn't ordered housekeeping, and it was too early in my stay for them to be checking the room. I peered through the peephole but didn't see anyone outside. My heart raced as the memory of the man from earlier flashed in my mind. I called the front desk to ask if they had sent anyone, but the answer was no. I requested that someone from the staff come to my room for safety. A few minutes later, a maid knocked on my door. I explained what had happened, thanked her for coming, and left for dinner, hoping the incident was a one-off. That night, I decided to take a city lights tour and explore Austin's nightlife. The vibrant energy of the city helped me shake off the lingering fear from earlier. By the time I returned to my room around 10 p.m., I had almost forgotten the strange man and the knock at my door. But that peace was short-lived. After I'd changed into my pajamas and was lying in bed, I heard it, a faint creak at the door, as if someone was testing the lock. I froze, unsure if it was my imagination. Then slowly, the door clicked open. I turned just in time to see the figure of a man, dressed in black, wearing a baseball hat and a mask, slipping into the room. He was stealthy, but I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. My body went cold with fear. I was paralyzed as I watched him creep closer, my breath catching in my throat. He moved toward the bed with deliberate, slow steps. Just as he reached me, he lunged, grabbing my arms and trying to cover my mouth. I screamed. I fought with everything I had, kicking and thrashing as he attempted to silence me. My heart pounded as adrenaline surged through me. The fear I felt was primal, deep. I could feel his hands tightening around my wrists, and the metallic glint from earlier, a knife, I realized, flashed in my peripheral vision. His strength overpowered me, and for a moment I thought it was over. Then, a knock echoed through the room. The man froze, and I screamed for help again, louder this time. He cursed under his breath, releasing his grip and darting toward the door. The knocking grew frantic, and I heard a voice outside, asking if everything was okay. The man shoved the door open and pushed the person who had been knocking to the floor before sprinting down the hall. I lay there in shock as the maid who had knocked stumbled into my room, her face pale with fear. She asked if I was okay, but I couldn't respond. I was shaking, gasping for breath. Moments later, people from neighboring rooms poured into the hallway, followed by hotel staff. The police were called, and they arrived quickly. The hotel's security footage showed the man entering the building and using a master key to gain access to my room. He had somehow acquired the key, but his face remained hidden under his hat and mask. The footage confirmed what I had feared from the beginning. It was the same man who had helped me with my bags on the first day. The police conducted a thorough investigation, and I gave them all the details I could, but despite their efforts, the man was never caught. The idea that he had gotten away, that he might do this again to someone else, haunted me. The hotel compensated me with a full refund and moved me to a different room, but that did little to ease my mind. I struggled to sleep for the rest of my stay. Even in broad daylight, I found myself looking over my shoulder, searching for his face in the crowds of Austin. On my last night in the hotel, the nightmare worsened. Around 2 a.m., I awoke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. I held my breath, praying it was just a guest returning late. But then, something brushed against the door, faint scratching sounds, like nails dragging along the wood. I knew it was him. This time, I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone, called the front desk, and explained what was happening in a hushed, terrified whisper. Minutes later, security arrived, but when they opened the door, no one was there. The hallway was empty, silent. Yet deep in my gut, I knew he was still watching, waiting for another chance. I cut my trip short the next day, leaving Austin behind with a heavy heart. The city was beautiful, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I had narrowly survived something truly evil. And the scariest part, he was still out there. Somewhere. Tom and Sarah had been looking forward to their weekend getaway for months. After an exhausting work week, the chance to escape to the peaceful countryside was exactly what they needed. They were headed to a small village in upstate New York, surrounded by rolling hills, orchards, and quaint farms. The weather was perfect, crisp and cool, with a gentle breeze that carried the sweet smell of the coming autumn. They had rented a cozy cabin for the weekend and planned to spend their days exploring the rural charm and relaxing. As they drove through the winding roads, the sunlight filtering through the trees, they couldn't help but feel a sense of serenity wash over them. The air was fresh, and the landscape around them was lush with greenery. Occasionally, they passed by small ponds that mirrored the vibrant sky and a few scattered farms that dotted the hillside. It was idyllic. "This place is gorgeous," Sarah said, her hand resting on Tom's arm. "I wish we could just stay here forever." "I know," Tom agreed, smiling. "It's like something out of a storybook." They laughed, chatted, and even stopped a couple of times to take in the scenic views, feeling the stress of city life melting away. By mid-afternoon, they had stopped at a local diner for a light lunch before deciding to take a detour off the main road. They drove deeper into the countryside, passing through lanes that grew narrower and more isolated. As they turned a sharp corner, they stumbled upon something that made Sarah gasp in delight: a massive apple orchard. The trees were loaded with bright red apples, their branches heavy under the weight of the fruit. The sight was mesmerizing, a perfect slice of rural Americana, and it called out to them. "Look at that!" Sarah exclaimed. "I've never seen so many apples in one place. Do you think we can go in?" Tom smiled, pulling the car over to the side of the road. "It won't hurt to ask." They got out of the car and walked closer to the garden, marveling at the abundance of fruit. Just outside the orchard, on a small wooden bench, sat an elderly man. He looked to be in his late 70s, with a kind face weathered by time and a slight smile playing on his lips. He was dressed in old-fashioned overalls, and a wide-brimmed hat shielded his face from the sun. "Good afternoon," Tom called out cheerfully, waving. The old man looked up, smiling warmly. "Afternoon, young folks," he said in a gravelly voice. "Lovely day for a walk, ain't it?" Tom and Sarah approached him, and after a few pleasantries, Sarah asked, "Is this your apple orchard?" The old man nodded slowly. "Sure is. Been in the family for generations. Used to pick apples here with my father when I was your age." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Would it be all right if we picked some? They look amazing." The old man chuckled softly. "Take as many as you like. Plenty to go around." Tom and Sarah beamed with gratitude and immediately set about picking apples. They spent the next half hour carefully plucking the ripest ones they could find, laughing as they filled a basket and then another, eventually loading them into their car's trunk. The air smelled sweet with the aroma of apples, and they felt like children again, indulging in the simple joy of a perfect day. Once they were done, they returned to the old man, thanking him profusely for his generosity. "Not a problem," he said, smiling. "Enjoy them." With that, Tom and Sarah waved goodbye, got back into their car, and began to drive out of the orchard. But as they approached the gate, a woman appeared in the road, frantically waving her arms for them to stop. Her face was stern, her brow furrowed with anger. Tom slowed the car, and they rolled down the window. "What do you think you're doing?" the woman snapped, her voice sharp and biting. Sarah blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Those apples," the woman hissed, pointing to the back of their car. "You've taken dozens of them. Get them out of the car now, or I'm calling the police." Tom and Sarah exchanged confused glances. "Wait, we were given permission," Tom explained. "The man who owns the orchard said we could take some." "What man?" the woman spat. "My husband and I own this orchard, and there's no old man here. Are you trying to lie your way out of this?" Sarah felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. But there was an old man. He was sitting on that bench, just by the trees. He told us we could pick as many apples as we wanted. The woman's face darkened with anger. "Don't you dare make up stories. There's no old man here, never has been. If you don't unload those apples right now, I'm calling the cops." Tom felt his heart race. "Ma'am, I swear to you, we're not making this up. Please, come with us. We'll show you where he was sitting." Reluctantly, the woman followed them as they led her back to the spot where they had seen the old man. But when they arrived, the bench was empty. No sign of anyone. Tom and Sarah looked around in confusion, feeling a sudden chill in the air. There was only one entrance to the orchard, the one they had driven through. The man couldn't have left without them seeing him. He was right here, Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. I swear. The woman crossed her arms, her expression hard. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You must have imagined it. Tom and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that something was very wrong. The orchard, which had seemed so welcoming just moments ago, now felt oppressive and cold. The apple trees loomed around them like silent witnesses, and the once pleasant breeze now carried an eerie stillness. We should go, Tom said quietly, taking Sarah's hand. The woman glared at them one last time before storming off. Without another word, Tom and Sarah rushed back to their car, hearts pounding. As they drove away from the orchard, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had just escaped something far more sinister than an angry landowner. Once they were far enough from the property, they stopped in the village at a small grocery store. Shaken, they decided to ask the locals about the man they had seen. They described the old man to a few bystanders, hoping for some explanation. But every person they spoke to gave them the same puzzled look. No one like that lives here, one man said. That orchard belongs to the Dawson family. Been in the family for years, but there's no old man. Are you sure? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. We saw him. He was sitting on a bench right by the trees. Another woman nearby shook her head. No one's seen an old man around those parts. It's just the Dawsons. Maybe you were mistaken. Tom and Sarah left the village in stunned silence. As they drove back to their cabin, they both felt a growing unease, an inexplicable dread that lingered long after the sun had set. That night, as they lay in bed, neither of them could sleep. The image of the old man's kindly smile haunted them. The next morning, they packed up and left early, cutting their trip short. They didn't take any of the apples with them. As they drove away, they couldn't help but glance back at the orchard, its trees heavy with fruit, standing silent and still under the gray sky. Whatever they had experienced there, they would never forget it.